Hello and welcome to Infrastructure Matters, a podcast dedicated to exploring the dynamic world of infrastructure, asset management and public works. I'm your host for this special episode, Marc Sibbald, Director of Fleet at IPWEA, and coming to you from the IPWEA Fleet Conference. Today I'm joined by Will Batty, Regional Manager at Geotab, to discuss how connected vehicle data, artificial intelligence and predictive maintenance analytics are transforming the fleet management landscape, from improving safety and sustainability to influencing smarter infrastructure planning. Will offers practical insights and a clear view of what's next for the industry. So grab a coffee, sit back and enjoy this forward-thinking conversation about the future of fleet and data-driven decision-making.
Okay, and welcome to a special edition of Infrastructure Matters. We're at the Fleet Conference, the annual IPWEA Fleet Conference, and my guest today is Will Batty from Geotab. Welcome, Will.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here. It's been a fantastic days at the last few days at the conference. As we were talking before, getting to speak to fleet operators firsthand and some of the technology they're using in their business to innovate is really impressive, and great to see what's happening in the future as well.
Yeah, and we often forget that fleet are assets too. There may not be roads and bridges, but they're still assets that need to be managed with the same discipline. So this is why we're doing this special edition of the podcast.
That's it, yeah. And what we can do with that and the power of data to help manage those assets is definitely something we're going to explore today, and really excited to be here to talk about that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, just to kick things off, because some of our audience may not be familiar with the fleet side of asset management, so they may not know who Geotab is. So why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to Geotab?
Yeah, sure. So Geotab's a leading global provider when it comes to connected vehicle and asset tracking solutions. So what that really means in its simplest form is we're providing insight by collecting data out of the vehicle. So key things such as driver behavior, engine diagnostics, vehicle location, and we're putting that into a platform and able to organize it in a way that fleet managers and operators can then take real insights and make decisions on that in their business. So things to help around safety, it might be productivity and optimization, or drive change in sustainability. We're giving that ability to them to really for the insights that they're available to them. We've been around for 25 years now this year, which is a huge milestone for the business. And today we boast over 55,000 customers and 4.7 million connected vehicles on the platform. So it's growing at a rapid rate. And we're also now in 160 different countries globally. So Geotab is becoming everywhere, and it's the same in Australia as well. One of the key things we're seeing from our position in the industry is for the fourth consecutive year, we've now been voted number one by ABI Research when it comes to telematics providers globally. So this is an independent research organisation that looks at things such as innovation and things like open platforms and the solutions we provide to our customers and ranks them against each other. So we're really proud of that. And for the fourth consecutive year, it's a great thing to have.
Yeah, congratulations. We set up a couple of questions and we've prepared a little bit, but some of the things you said there were really interesting. So I'm just going to double click on that if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And probably the big thing is a lot of the audience may not be directly involved in fleet. So they might have heard things about telematics. They might have heard things about dots on map.
Yeah.
But telematics isn't that anymore, isn't it? We're like is it the third or fourth generation of telematics?
Something like that. Yeah, I think going back 10 years ago when I started in this industry, it was all about dot on a map. The big brother was the big thing we're battling, and it's come such a long way in the last 10 years in particular. We talked just before about insights, and that's what we're really moving towards. So, things about driver behavior. What are they doing out in the field every day? How are they performing? How do we make our drivers more efficient as well? So looking at, what routes they might be taking, how do we optimize that? But also that really rich data from a vehicle engine fault code perspective. We're able to see ahead of time what might break down by getting those notifications and not relying on the driver. And this is really helping us keep our costs down and vehicles on the road, which is incredibly important when we've been talking to the fleet operators over the last few days.
So if I was to translate that, you're basically helping organisations, local government and other organisations save money. If you're using less fuel through an optimised route, that's less money, less expense, less CO2, isn't it?
That's incredibly right. So, a lot of customers have come to us in the past with a safety focus, but we're able to now move into those things to help drive costs down. And you mentioned CO2 there. Sustainability is a big part of that. And we've been talking to customers about not just ticking a box when it comes to being green, but actually using it as a competitive advantage. So while we can measure CO2 emissions and help reduce that, how do we look at efficient routes we might take to reduce fuel costs? So we're doing a double-edged sword of helping the environment, but actually putting costs back into reducing costs back into our business.
Yeah, and you mentioned fault codes before. Downtime, it's one of the biggest challenges for fleets, but fleet managers generally don't really measure it that much, but it's pretty easy to measure with telematics, but also pretty easy to predict now with AI and technology, isn't it?
Yeah, we're jumping into the future now. I think AI is everywhere. Doesn't matter what industry you are when you're talking about technology, it's the buzzword. The introduction of generative AI over the last few years with things like ChatGPT has just fast-tracked everything we're doing. And at Geotab, we're working really hard on this space and trying to innovate. And some of the things we're looking at is around predictive maintenance. So, one of the things generative AI allows us to do is look at historical patterns and then learn from that and adapt. And we're able to see now if a vehicle in the past is broken down because of a reason, because of battery voltage, we can see that vehicle is now leading towards that exact same incident and alert the fleet manager in real time. This is ensuring that they're getting ahead of the curve and keeping that vehicle on the road as much as they can.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just going to delve into the sort of go-to-market model because I think it's quite interesting, and it's one that can really benefit listeners in that. So you have Geotab, the global business, and lots of developers, lots of resources, and everything like that. But in Australia, we have local resellers, and they're the ones that understand the local business, the local market, the local conditions, and they're the ones that would actually work with the customer. Is that how that's the model?
That's correct. Yeah. So we don't go direct to customers at Geotab. We've got a global network of over 700 partners that, as you mentioned, that work directly with the end customer. And these guys are the feet on the ground. They've got the local expertise. They're talking to customers every day and understand it. It allows us at Geotab to focus on that innovation and R&D and really expand to work with these really large fleets. It doesn't mean we don't hold their hand through that. We're definitely there to support them. But these guys are there to help make sure your installation's done, your ongoing support, your training, and really be that voice for Geotab in the market. And if you're operating in regional areas, you've got those people out there that actually understand the community and can work with you. It's not someone sitting in a corporate head office somewhere else. These guys are out in the field and working really closely with our partners and customers as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've actually heard, having conversations with our members that are custom Geotab customers and the resellers, I've heard about the Geotab marketplace, and it seems really relevant for fleet because of the compliance requirements of heavy vehicles, and there's been a couple of partnerships. So what is the marketplace? How does that work?
Yeah, it's probably the last piece of the puzzle when we talk about the Geotag ecosystem, and that's something we talk about a lot about Geotab. It's not just a platform, it's an ecosystem for partners, for customers, and for others to collaborate within. So the marketplace is over about 200 different integrated partners today. So we're talking about specialists in their chosen field. So things like video, for example, route optimization, you mentioned compliance, so electronic work diaries. There's a range of different solutions where these guys are best in class at what they do in their specific field. But we know that customers today are actually wanting to work on that single pane of glass. It's difficult to go across a range of different platforms. So the marketplace allows that. We're able to integrate these solutions into the Geotab platform. And as a customer, you can access those tools and expand beyond just telematics right within the one platform, which is my Geotab.
Yeah. So just as an example, one of the customers I was talking to, one of our members, I think they're doing pre-start checks and they're doing forms and they've got a whole lot of business processes, and they've been able to use a marketplace partner to adapt the forms into the Geotab platform, and now their operators, drivers just have that single pane of glass, as you said. Is that a typical example?
Absolutely, that's a perfect example, and that's where our partners come in as well. So we talked about how they're out in the field. This allows them to go and work with these marketplace partners to create niche and customized solutions for our customers. So just like customers the same, all our partners have different capabilities and specialties that they can focus on. So it gives the power of choice back to the customer on who they work with. And that's a great example when it comes to the marketplace and how it can add value into the single pane of glass.
Yeah, I've got another story where one of you is actually a Geotab customer, and they went off and built their own app to help them with their fleet. And then they quickly realised that it probably should have gone to the marketplace and found the same solution was there, and they'd invested all this time and resources. So
yeah, absolutely. And you did mention they could build their own app, and that is another great thing of the platform. Everything's open from an API perspective, so customers have the power to do more with their data. They can customize and create their own solutions. They can push data into other parts of their business and analyze it in a more meaningful way. So it really gives you power to do what you need with your fleet data, and I think that's going to be a big part of the future going forward.
Yeah. Now, just talking about data, and I was lucky enough to be in the US recently and got to speak to some of Geotab customers. I was talking to the City of Orlando team, and they mentioned they were using a product called Altitude. And what really interests me, they were using it to plan truck rest stops, which is a big issue in Australia, trying to work out where to put rest stops, where to put the facilities. So it seemed like this mass amount of data that's in the Geotab platform was enabling local governments and state governments to plan infrastructure. Is that what's happening in the US?
Yeah, so as we mentioned earlier, we've got 4.7 million connected vehicles today in the platform, and that is growing every day. We're rapidly approaching the 5 million mark. And, with that, we're collecting close to 80 billion data points every single day. So you can think about how much powerful data that gives us. So what the example you've given there is a program called Geotab Altitude. And what this does, it takes that data, anonymizes it, aggregates it, and creates it into big data that we can use for planning and the like that you mentioned. So, a great example, we're working with a company called The Ray in the US, and these guys look at their public-private enterprise looking at charging infrastructure on trucking routes. Now, this is going to help with the transition to electric. So instead of not knowing where to put these, we can use really granular data to understand where these vehicles are stopping and how long they're stopping for. So we know where to put the charger and then how long to keep it there for. Another great example, we're working with the New York City Department of Transport, and we're looking at things that we can focus on, ways to make the roads safer around the area. So traditionally, they've used traffic studies or speed guns to work out how fast vehicles are traveling down certain roads where they might be able to enhance things like speed humps to slow vehicles down. But we're now able to use this data in real time through programs like Geotab Altitude to focus on really granular data that then they're able to make these decisions in real time. We can even focus on the type of vehicle and how long they're traveling through those periods. So it's giving a lot of power back to the cities and the councils over there. It's enabling them to go from being reactive to proactive when it comes to planning and infrastructure.
Yeah, just on a smaller scale, we had an example of New Zealand when I was over there last year, where a council was using the data, and they were able to tell the roundabouts their own drivers were behaving in a certain way, approaching a roundabout, and this fleet person was actually, I don't know, smart enough or aware enough to go and talk to the transport planners, and they kind of came up with some sort of solution to try and change the road to better improve the traffic flow.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of collaboration between technology, the councils, and their partners themselves and customers as well, to work out how we use this data to better enhance our roads and make them more safer at the end of the day.
Yeah, okay. So we've talked a bit about how great it is. Like we're all technology, AI, we're all excited about that. But for a fleet manager, they've got to go to their boss, and there's a cost to this, right?
Yep.
So, how can you advise the audience to what sort of business case or ROI what should they be talking about?
It's a really good question, and I think it starts with it's no longer just about the fleet manager. We're using so much, we're collecting so much data, and it can be used in so many different ways now. So, things like we talked about sustainability or how we reduce costs. So bringing other people from the business into it that have an interest in the data in the early stages is really important. So maybe going to someone in finance, it might be going to HR, operations, safety, or even sustainability. Understanding their requirements and how they could use that data is going to be really integral to getting this off the ground. I guess, that consensus buying, it's much easier to get a business case if everyone wants the data. So that's a really good starting point. I think then it's looking at, making sure we set really clear objectives as well. So understanding what our short-term goals are. So making sure we've got a reason to go into it in the first place, but have an eye to the future, because we want to choose a platform that enables us to be able to go down the road and still innovate and have that capability of our long-term goals. And then it's about justifying the ROI. So it's working with a partner to, once you've understood what those goals are, how might I solve them, and what might be a tangible outcome from the end of it. So you're presenting a really robust business case back into the organization, And then because you've got that collective buy-in from multiple stakeholders, it makes it much easier to get it across the line.
Yeah, fantastic. And that is that collaboration, isn't it? That if 4 or 5 people can use the data or can benefit from the data. And we talk about it a lot in Fleet with our members. If you've got a safety person or you've got a sustainability person and they've got their goals, they often align with Fleet. You've just got to work with them. And, I often just say, go and say hello.
That's it. Yeah, it's starting the conversation. I think we've often been so siloed in our approach to this, but a lot of the conversations we have now are with different parts of the business, and you can see that they are very close in their goals and what they're trying to do. And it probably highlights the power of fleet data and how important it is to businesses. It is such a big investment for the business to have an operating a fleet. So making sure we can make it, safer, more efficient, and now with sustainability really drive those goals. I think it's going to help this data improve businesses overall.
Yeah, I've got a bit of when I talk to fleet managers and I try to make them realise how important they are as providing a service or generating revenue, I suggest that they get all the keys and lock them in a cupboard and see how much business can get done. But we don't get, in the IT department, computer stops and the business stops.
It does, yeah.
Fleet's really the same. If you're not managing your fleet properly and it stops, it's downtime, it's cost to your business. So.
Yeah, it's just another technological tool that you've got in your business these days. And I think that's where vehicles are starting to transform into. They're no longer just, the metal that moves you from A to B. They're actually tools in how you run your business. So the data we're collecting helps with that. And yeah, all right, if you lock the keys away, it'd be an interesting day on that day for most fleet managers.
Yeah, no one's done it yet, but no. I keep putting it out there as a challenge. If you're looking, if you want to be seen or you want to get noticed, try that for a bit.
It's a good way to end the conference. Maybe we can challenge someone for next year.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe just to finish off, we're already talking about technology. We're talking about AI. We're talking about big data. Like these are all themes that maybe 5 years ago we were talking about as the future, but we're here. We're now. Yeah. We're using all that stuff today. What's coming next? What's in the next 5 years?
Yeah, we touched on AI. I think the one thing we can be sure is that technology is going to be rapidly evolving over the next 5 years. It's starting now, and it's going to continue to evolve. And I think it's happening so quickly. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's everywhere now, right? AI is powering that. And I think that's going to be at the forefront of fleet technology over the next few years. So we talked about, things like predictive analytics. We're actually using it in other ways as well. So tools like ChatGPT, we're starting to see them in fleet management now. So we've got a product called Geotab Ace that's in North America at the moment that we're looking to bring to Australia. So this enables you to have that same conversation with your fleet data that you might have with ChatGPT. So you can ask it those questions that you just need to know. So it's looking at things like, how much idling did I have last month? Who my problematic drivers were? Which drivers were at the pub, something like that might be a bit of interest. But those kind of quick questions enables the fleet manager to act really quickly. And I think that's going to make them more proactive in their measures. And it's not to replace the role of a fleet manager. I think that's a really important position to make when it comes to AI. AI is there to be that co-pilot. It's able to find the data quickly, feed it to you so you can focus on more strategic things about implementing sustainability goals. That's where you want to focus as a fleet manager. You don't want to be sifting through data for days on end trying to find the answer. And that's where AI is going to really help us. And then the main thing it really does is it analyzes a vast amount of data really quickly. So it can identify patterns you might not even thought about. It can help us with things like benchmarking as well. So if we're looking how we compare against our peers in the industry and set realistic goals, this is where that benchmarking data can be really valuable. So I think AI is going to be at the forefront of that. But there's a couple other trends that are probably going to pop up as well, which have been around for a while. So we've been talking about sustainability and the transition to electric. We know that not every vehicle is primed to be an electric vehicle, and we've been discussing that over the last couple of days. So it's thinking about sustainability as that competitive advantage. So using fleet data to understand in your standard ICE vehicles that is there a way to look at it that, yes, we can meet our goals from sustainability, but as we talked about, how do we reduce costs as well? But if we are going electric, EVs are going to be critical. It's going to need something like a telematics system because you can't just go down and fill up at the end of the day with petrol. You've got to get them charged and making sure you're optimizing that battery health so that the next day half your fleet's not down because someone forgot to plug them in. So this is going to be critical and it's going to be a key step. But getting started is the hardest. We can't just go out and put 100 vehicles tomorrow with EVs. It doesn't work like that. And so we need data to help plan that. And that's, again, where analysing historical patterns that we've seen with our fleet data can actually answer some of those questions. So how far do vehicles need to go? What's my return on investment? Is this actually something I'm going to be able to justify to the business? We talked about that business case. So that's a key thing. And then with infrastructure planning, it's absolutely critical, understanding where my vehicles are going and using that big data as well. So that's probably the second one. And the last one for me is around video. And we're seeing this, we talked about North America. This is a key focus when it comes to safety and how we're solving problems. Telematics data gives us a huge amount of rich data to have a look at a safety perspective. We understand how drivers are behaving, but it doesn't give you that next level. And I think that's what video comes in. So we're able to pick up things such as distraction, fatigue, and we're able to make real-time intercepts to understand that we can make sure that driver's safe. So if someone's falling asleep, we're able to take action before an accident happens. So it makes us proactive, but it also gives us the context of the why. And I use a great example of my own personal experience. We were driving and I had a camera in the car and a kid ran out in front of the road. So I slammed the brakes and took the preventive action. Now, the data would have shown a harsh braking event, and we know in some businesses this is used to coach drivers, or even sometimes it can be used as a punishment in a way. So that wouldn't have given the context that someone ran out in front of the vehicle. So it's a really powerful tool in that sense. And the last one's around coaching. So it helps massively when it comes to the coaching side of things, and you have to show someone where they're driving poorly and how they can improve instead of just looking at data. So for me, these are the three key trends I think is going to happen over the next 5 years, but there's going to be plenty more as well. And I think it's going to be a very important time for fleet managers when it comes to technology.
Yeah, the role is really pivoting away from sort of ordering stuff to becoming, like a data analyst in a way.
Yeah.
But the good news is AI will help us. We don't, it'll make it simpler. And if we know what we want to ask, then hopefully AI will help us find the answer or tell us before based on the questions we've asked previously.
Yeah, you make a really good point. It's the role of the fleet operator is very different over the next 5 years as well. It's going from managing just your vehicles and understanding how they're working to now you're becoming a data analyst. You're becoming this tech savvy. You have to become for change management. So you have to be training your staff up. You're going to have to work out how you work with AI. So the role of the fleet operator and the manager over the next 5 years is really important, that they can stay ahead of the curve and they can adjust to how technology is going to be impacting their role. And I think we talked about that yesterday with a couple of them around, it's just that shift in thinking. And if they can do that and stay ahead of the curve, they're the ones that can excel over the next 5 years. So It's going to be an interesting time.
And it really links into IPWEA. What we do is education and helping people progress their careers through learning. So it's a really nice fit when we start to talk about it like this. So.
Absolutely. And there's been some great sessions over the last few days where they've had that ability to learn and how they can adapt as well.
Yeah. Well, Will, thank you very much for being a guest on our podcast. I'm a special guest host this time around. Our CEO, David Jenkins, normally hosts these, so it's great to get some fleet conversation into infrastructure matters. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Mark. And it's been a great conference as always. So looking forward to the next one next year.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this special edition of Infrastructure Matters, recorded live at the IPWEA Fleet Conference. A big thank you to Will Batty from Geotab for joining us and sharing such valuable insights into innovation, AI, and the future of fleet management. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We hope this episode has inspired new thinking around fleet as a strategic asset. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Infrastructure Matters on your favourite podcast platform. And follow IPWEA on LinkedIn for more insights, updates, and upcoming episodes. I'm Marc Sibbald, signing off and reminding you that in the world of infrastructure and fleet, every detail matters.